Please be seated. Home, according to Robert Frost, is the place where, when you have to go there, they have to take you in. That famous line comes toward the end of a long poem, Death of the Hired Man, published in 1914 in Frost's second volume of poetry. You may have read it in college, even in high school. In any case, the poem is an extended dialogue between Mary and Warren, a farming couple who must decide what to do with Silas, the broken-down hired hand who has returned after a long absence. Mary, who has already had a conversation with Silas, is the more sympathetic of the two. Warren argues that Silas was never a good worker, so why think that anything had changed? Back and forth they go, and Silas, who is the subject of their debate, is nowhere to be seen. He is by the stove in the kitchen, where Mary left him fast asleep. Be kind, Mary pleads. I'll not have the fellow back, Warren retorts. What help he is, there's no depending on. Off he goes, always when I need him most. The conversation between Warren and Mary could be construed as a kind of theological debate, a dialogue, if you will, between justice and mercy. Should Silas get only what he deserves? Or should he be received simply because his need is so great? The entire passage reads like this. This is Warren speaking. Home, he mocked gently. And Mary replies, yes, what else but home? It all depends on what you mean by home. Of course, he's nothing to us, any more than was the hound that came a stranger to us out of the woods, worn out upon the trail. And Warren again. Home is the place where, when you have to go there, they have to take you in. In our gospel lesson for today, Jesus has come home. We aren't told what kind of reception he got when he pulled the latch on the front door of his family's home place, nor are we even told who was there. His mother, presumably, maybe some of the younger siblings. It wouldn't be surprised if there weren't some nieces and nephews, too, the children of sibs who had chosen a more traditional path than their wild man road. I wonder if there was a festive meal to welcome him home. Wine, food, laughter, the kids begging Jesus to come out and play. We can reasonably assume that Jesus and the disciples who were traveling with him were dog-tired. They had been on the road and back and forth across the lake. Jesus had calmed a storm and healed a demoniac and raised a young girl from the dead. And the crowds, always the crowds pressing in on him, wanting something, needing something. I had a professor in seminary who said that ministry is like being pecked to death by ducks. I wonder if Jesus ever felt that way. So bone weary that all he could think of was going home. Maybe there he could rest. All we're told is that Jesus left the village where the little girl was raised and returned to his hometown. On the Sabbath, whether that was one day or several days later, we don't know, he went to the synagogue and began to teach. At first, the people of Nazareth were pleased that one of their own had gone off and made good. His fame would no doubt reflect well on them. But then, practically in mid-sentence, the story turns. Is not this the carpenter, the son of Mary? And they took offense at him. We can imagine their grumbling. He's the oldest son, and he didn't even come home to help his mother. Did you see that scruffy crowd he's going around with? He's so skinny. Why doesn't he get a wife and settle down? It's like Warren has entered the room. But why? What happened in between many who heard him were astounded and they took offense? What happened is that once Jesus stopped talking about how good it was to be home and started talking about what he was really up to, their minds snapped shut. Mark doesn't record what Jesus actually said, but Luke, in his version of the story, does. Suffice it to say that Jesus tells them some things they don't want to hear. In Luke, his listeners are filled with wrath and actually run Jesus out of town and try to kill him. Sociologists tell us that groups of people, whether it's a family, a community organization, a business, a town, construct systems that function in predictable ways. In these systems, things are done this way, not that way. When some upstart comes in and starts rearranging the furniture, there's going to be hell to pay. But the prophet's job is to rearrange the furniture. The prophet's job is to shake things up, to challenge old assumptions. As Old Testament scholar Walter Brueggemann puts it, the job of the prophet is to imagine the world differently. And of course, he goes on to say, in their own time and in every time since, including today, in every time since, the people that control the power structure do not know what to make of them. So they try to silence them. Now, if this was just a 2,000-year-old story about unsophisticated people in some backwater town, that would be one thing. But as Brueggemann points out, it is a stunningly contemporary story. And here, for me, is what the disturbing question is. What if the church has become Jesus' hometown? We've known him all our lives. We love how he welcomes the children and heals the sick and forgives the sinner. Every week we are assured of his love. But how have we, and by we, I mean the church with a capital C, how have we throughout the centuries domesticated the prophetic Jesus? Have we silenced his radical message so thoroughly that we no longer even know what it is? What would happen, I ask you, if Jesus marched right into Calvary Church and started talking like a prophet? Would we take offense? I will confess to you that Jesus does offend me. In fact, the more I know him, the more compelling his claim on my life, the greater the offense. I'm offended every time I try and am not able to love my enemies or turn the other cheek or go the extra mile or forgive the ones who have offended me. I'm offended every time Jesus talks about the poor or tells me to take nothing with me for my journey. I'm offended when he tells me not to take any thought for what I shall eat or drink or what I will wear or where I will sleep. I'm offended when Jesus tells me not to be afraid. Which is why the church, whether we like it or not, still needs its prophets. Jesus asks so much of us. And we still need to be confronted. We still need to be challenged. We still need to be called to an ever-deepening faith and a more sacrificial willingness to work for justice. And because we will never get it all quite right, we will always need to depend on the wide mercy of God. Warren, it turns out, is the hero of Robert Frost's poem. For by the end, his heart has softened. And the church, for all its flaws, is our spiritual home, where we go when we are lost or broken. Here, at least, we know we will be taken in. Thanks be to God.